Well, we in the church think of Advent and try and pay some attention to that season. But of course, in the popular imagination, Advent is basically just a countdown to Christmas. And in fact, it probably gets swallowed up by the whole Christmas thing, doesn't it? People tend to think Christmas begins when all the decorations turn up in the shops, which of course was several weeks ago. And Christmas ends with Christmas Day. And then we have our Boxing Day sales and all that sort of stuff, don't we? But for the church, which can be a bit nerdy sometimes, I know, but in other ways it's countercultural. Christmas doesn't begin until Christmas Eve. And then it goes for 12 days after that. And from now until Christmas Eve, we observe the less well-known season of Advent. And each year, to shock us into remembering that this season of hope and expectation is not just about anticipating the arrival of a baby. Advent always kicks off with a set of readings focused on anticipating the coming of Christ, the second coming of Christ, when all is fulfilled and the time as we know it has reached an end. So it's not ignoring the expectation of Christ's arrival as a baby, but it is to remind us not to turn that into a baby shower or something like that, cute little thing, but to keep sight of the bigger picture in which this baby is born as part of God's surprising means of shaking heaven and earth and bringing a whole new world to birth. So our readings from Matthew's Gospel and Paul's letter to the Romans both focused on calling us to wake up to what is going on, to what is coming our way, and to make sure that we're prepared and ready. And in Isaiah we get that beautiful glimpse of what it's going to be like in the coming reign of God. In the Gospel account, the call includes warnings about the consequences of not being ready. And among those warnings is one of the most contentious and controversial images in the Bible, an image associated with what has become known as rapture theology. At the coming of the Son of Man, two will be in the field, one will be taken and one will be left. Two women grinding their meal together, one will be taken, one will be left. The most common interpretation of that verse is that those who are taken are among the elect, and the angels of the Son of Man are gathering to his coming, while those who are left await the prospect of judgment. I found some scholars arguing the opposite interpretation, that this passage calls us to aim to be left behind and not taken. And when I read it, it made a lot more sense, it made quite a lot of sense. Firstly, we've got the historical context points us in that direction. The early apocalyptic literature was born in an era of persecution. It flourished among downtrodden people who were attracted to big cosmic visions, and it sort of helped them to interpret their present trials and troubles as evidence of their favoured status in the eyes of God. When Matthew was written, Jerusalem had been sacked by the Romans, and in many places Christians were especially fearful of being busted by the next Roman patrol. So imagine your way into that context where a totalitarian regime is enforcing its will with ruthless efficiency. And death squads knock down doors in the night, and those who are deemed to be troublemakers disappear without trace. And imagine yourself not only in the trouble in such a world, but as a member of an outlawed faith community. who are regarded as troublemakers because they refuse to call Caesar Lord. And perhaps some of your friends have already disappeared. And with that in mind, listen to the verse again. 2 will be in the field, 1 will be taken, and 1 will be left. 2 women will be grinding meal together, 1 will be taken, and 1 will be left. So in the world of this gospel's first hearers, which do you reckon was the more frightening image, to be snatched away or left behind? And so hold that background, context and atmosphere in your mind while we look at the verses around that verse. They say, well, before it says, "For as the days of Noah were, so will be the coming of the Son of Man. For as in those days, before the flood, they were eating and drinking, marrying and giving in marriage," in other words, just about going their usual business, "until the day Noah entered the ark, and they knew nothing until the flood came and swept them all away." So you just pause there. The Gospel writer tells us that this is the comparison image. And who do you reckon you want to be in the days of Noah when the flood comes? The ones who are swept away, or the ones who are left behind? They knew nothing until the flood came and swept them all away. So too will be the coming of the Son of Man. Then 2 will be in the field, 1 will be taken away, 1 will be left. So if it is written in the days of persecution, death squads, and it's compared to the flood, sweeping people away unawares while one chosen family and a boatload of animals were left behind in safety, it seems to me to be pretty clear that it's being taken, that we're supposed to be afraid of, and being left behind that we are supposed to hope and pray for, and to be awake and alert and preparing ourselves for. Now if that's so, what does it actually mean? How are we to aim to be left behind and prepare ourselves for that? We need to note again, as I did a couple of weeks ago, that Jesus does his own version of apocalyptic teaching, where God is not the author of the chaos and the destruction and the violence. Rather, the impending flood of chaos and destruction is caused by us. It's simply the natural consequence of human behaviour. We reap what we sow. If we do not wake up to ourselves, we will destroy one another and render our planet virtually uninhabitable. You don't have to look around too hard to see that Jesus knew what he was talking about. Even the apocalyptic images of the climate going out of control seem to be coming true around us. And the biggest contributor to this spiral and self-destruction is our constant refusal to face up to our own responsibility in the whole mess. And instead keep deluding ourselves that we can just look after our own and our own little circle and not worry about those outside our neat little circles and borders. Tough luck for them. And then whenever things seem to be getting out of hand, in our anxiety and our fear, we search for scapegoats and rise up against someone who we identify as the source of all our problems. The guilty party who we blame for bringing us to the brink of destruction. And so we get successive floods of persecution as we are swept up in the waves of contagious vengefulness that seem to be targeting some enemy, but we end up carrying us all off in ever-increasing floods of death, self-destruction. So how are we to prepare ourselves? As always, Jesus is our model, our leader, our example. Over and over we see that Jesus is not swept away in the rising tides of hostility and hatred, but stands firm, calling for love and mercy and gracious hospitality. When everyone else is swept up in a flood of anger towards Samaritans, Jesus is left behind, holding firm and telling stories of good Samaritans as neighbours, as models of grace. When everyone else is swept away in a flood of pious anger towards a woman caught in adultery, Jesus is left behind, piloting the last lifeboat of forgiveness and reconciliation. When everyone else is swept up in an angry unity that casts out the lepers, the demonised, the Gentiles, the prostitutes, the poor, the tax collectors, the sinners, the resident aliens, the homosexuals, or whoever was the scapegoat of the weak, Jesus is left behind, holding the line for love and hospitality and bearing witness to a God who never endorses our deluded quest to purge ourselves of one more enemy. And when the tide turns on him, as it always does against those who refuse to go along with the majority's consensus anger, and by their dissent expose it all for the lie that it is, Jesus is again left behind, this time nailed to a tree. This time revealing that God is willing to suffer the very worst that human cruelty can dish out, rather than compromise with the deadly peace that we would build on the blood of all these victims. If we still want a baby as our symbol of Advent, perhaps this year will be one of those children locked in Australia's barbaric offshore detention centres. Because the baby whose birth we anticipate in this season was similarly threatened, even as a baby, by a flood of hatred and fear, disguised as pious concern for national security. And that baby revealed us to the true face of God in the outcast and the persecuted. And that baby approaches us now as the crucified and risen one, who comes again to call us to wake up to ourselves and make sure that whenever the mob charges off abandoning compassion and mercy, we are left behind. Stand firm then. When all the world is swept away, hold fast, that the coming one may find us awake and steadfast in love and grace. Come, Lord Jesus, come.